Hello and welcome to our first podcast of the year on our series on cost of living and the state of the UK market. So, new year as I say, new lighting, new camera, exciting ahead. We're obviously coming into a year with yet again more uncertainty. It's an election year probably, so that could cause a lot of change. Whilst inflation seemed to be starting to be in control, it's just flicked up a tiny bit. And then we've got the uncertainty linked to the difficult situation in the Red Sea. So, who knows what this year's going to be bringing. But we'll be monitoring things on a monthly basis. And Hannah, have you got any sort of thoughts on where we are at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to be talking more about this next month. But we've been looking at our spend data and kind of reviewing over the last year. And we've seen some really interesting trends in terms of brands that have done well and not done so well in the last year. So no surprises, Vinted had a really, really positive year, so did Shein, some of those online players performing really, really well. We also saw Marks and Spencer's and Sainsbury's having really positive years. We actually anticipated that Sainsbury's would have a very good Christmas, and that's exactly what we saw, so that was good to see. Cinemas had another really strong year after obviously quite a problematic couple of years before that, with Barbenheimer obviously taking the stage there. If we look at some of the brands that had more challenging times, ASOS is right up there, so not all online players have had a positive year. And The Body Shop, we continue to see kind of issues there, and that's been in the press a little bit. But there's a lot more to come on that next month. But for now, we are really lucky and grateful to have Kirsty from the Crown Estate here. And Kirsty, I will let you introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, so I am Kirsty Garrett from Crown Estate. I look after insight and analysis there. And the Crown Estate is a slightly unusual company. So we are a company for the country, and we own land across the country and the seabed. So our focus very much is retail, workplace, and then our marine business, which I'll talk about less today. By having lifestyle and workplace, it's obviously very important for us as an insight function that we are helping the business to understand their customers. So effectively, a large part of my time is about understanding our customers' consumers.
Okay, well, first question for you then. How would you summarise 2023?
So 2023 was a hard year, and I think it was a hard year for everyone. We often talk about cost of living crisis, and actually I think it was more about quality of experience crisis. And within that, it's in our mindsets, or in mindsets of individuals, we think of it as a fleeting phenomenon, but actually it hasn't been. It's been here, it's probably here to stay. You talked about the sort of uncertainty that remains and will continue. And helping people to navigate through that is therefore a sort of critical part of it. We have got better, so I think as society we are better at working out what's most important to us, and a large part of that becomes about control. So that control, and through control you have better decision making, simpler decision making in many pieces, but really focusing on efforts on the money and health. Those are the two things that really sit at the heart of this sort of quality of life experience. Within sort of the money element of it, Hannah, you talked about the value.
Yeah.
And we've seen a real definition of value over the last sort of 12 to 18 months that I think will continue in. And that redefinition of value is, we saw things like regifting has become acceptable, and actually it's it's actually a good way to live your life as well as, but it's also about, as owners of, sort of Regent Street, St James and sort of assets across the country, shopping centres across the country, we are obviously looking to, make sure consumers have a great experience in our sort of areas. So that would include, those anchor points of those really important events. The Christmas lights is a great example of that. We saw 1 in 2 people saying they actually came into London just to experience the Christmas lights. So really those moments of being able to elevate the experience and I guess bring a sense of togetherness. So, we've seen, and I think there's people are navigating, what we've seen from lots of different evidence points is people are navigating this way through the me and the we. So the we is important for community. I think we've spent the last few years as society coming together to get through. But there is also more division coming through, and the division is often linked to income, because the control elements that I talked about earlier are actually easier the higher the income. But similarly, there's this sense of how to make the most of me. And making the most of me is, the sentiment of you can't pour from an empty cup. So we think that there's going to be a lot more emphasis on people having those moments in time. I think the fastest growing Google search is I am tired. And there are lots of ways of recuperating and rejuvenating yourself. And I think there's like 7 different types of rest that are required. And a lot of it is about the experiences that you have. It's spiritual, it's restorative, it's sleep. But it's also just about coming together, having the me time, but also coming together with others and enjoying moments.
And it's really interesting that you say that. I mean, we've seen health and wellness continue to be a strong sector throughout 2023, I guess. Do you think that all plays into what you've just said around consumers' need for rest and consumers' need to look after themselves a little bit better, given the trauma that the generational trauma we've all just experienced?
I think absolutely, and I also think it's a good quality. It's a good value for money. Value for money has lots of definitions, and value for money that delivers something that feels different is much more important to people nowadays. So I think and everything, we've got the holistic health that takes you from, everything into how you live your lives, the commutes we've talked about, through to your workplace, etc. So everything is about how to make us feel better as individuals. I think individuals naturally look for optimism. We're hopeful. And we look for ways to be hopeful for what's ahead of us. And there was a brilliant quote we saw from a consumer as part of some work we had done, where they said, forwards is still forwards. So, it might not be as fast as you want, it might not be as far as you want, but actually forwards is forward, and that's a positive. And people are looking for those positives.
Absolutely. You just touched on workplace there. I was going to ask you how some of this manifests itself in how we now imagine the workplace. I know it's another place which has seen a load of change since the pandemic, but how do you kind of see that changing going forward?
So workplace is interesting. It's a significant part of what we do, and therefore really understanding it, and it is changing, and it's changing at speed. Hybrid working is here to stay, and I think both employees and companies are struggling how to navigate their way through that. And there are various things that we can do to help. That we used to talk about earning the commute. We're now saying, actually, the commute's here. We're going to have to find ways to fix the commute. And there can be digitally enabled. It could be about, within offices, you've got live links to transport. You've got, even just things like putting in shower facilities, enabling people to cycle, enabling people to run, having flexibility across. So all of these things are hugely important, but we're also seeing, one of the big workplace trends is moving from a flight to quality, which with obviously sustainability, ESG, very prominent as it should be throughout, to this flight to character. And the flight to character is about really starting to engage the employee. So how do you successfully integrate place, culture, history, and your buildings and your location? We're very lucky. We're in the West End, and there's a real buzz to the place, and it's about, we spend a lot of energy and effort linking our workplace and our lifestyle businesses to think about, how do you make the overall experience? How do you justify that trip into the office? Because you can shop, you can eat, you're experiencing something you can't get at home. And also, linking back to the quality of life crisis, humans like other humans. Abstinence isn't good for us, and isolation isn't good for us. So anything that facilitates that. And, I think this will continue to evolve. One of the things we've seen is 1 in 5 jobs in London is now linked to the creative industry. Now, those creative industries have very different requirements. It's much more informal, it's much more collaborative, and their expectations of what sits round about them has also changed. So we're becoming much more, we deliberately don't call it the office now, we talk about workplace. Yeah. And actually the place is equally as important as the work. So I think it's all about moving us forward and embracing this change. It's not going anywhere.
So do you think that workplaces are going to start seeing even more retail leisure coming back? Because obviously there was a bit of a certainly in the leisure sector, it's like, well, do we want to be here because there's no one here? Do you think that is going to start to turn again?
I think so, and I think it's about the integration. So I think it's about, really good places, and, we talk about sort of urban restyling, and urban restyling is about having that mix, and the worker's hugely important to that mix. You don't want to be just about the worker or just about the shopper or just about the lifestyle or just about the leisure. Actually, the blend, and if you can blend that with the culture, the history, actually you've got a winning formula.
Okay, so that's started off with 2023. Let's end with, what do you think is going to happen in 2024? What's your summary outlook?
So, you mentioned at the beginning, there is a lot of uncertainty, and uncertainty, as we've seen, is hard for people to navigate. However, I would say 2023 was hard. I think that 2024 will be more optimistic. And I think that change that is coming through, I think those coping mechanisms that are in place will come to the fore. You mentioned inflation earlier. I think, slightly lower inflation and the stability in inflation helps consumers. So it helps us, we can do more of the autopilot. There's less of that walking about, totting everything up. There's less of that. And you can let the freedom, because often with control can equal freedom, which can sound, sort of a juxtaposition, but actually it brings that security to your decision making. So I think the outlook will be, I don't think it will be plain sailing, but I think it will be hopeful. And I also think the change that is potentially coming across all different parts of society, with change now comes optimism, with change comes the opportunity to do something different. I think the redefinition of value will continue. I think the quality of the experience will remain at the heart, and if anything will grow. I think our demands as consumers of people like us, the property developers, the brands that you mentioned, all of that will continue. I think we are getting better as society at having a voice and also expressing what we do like and what we don't like. And as businesses, we're much better, having to be, at responding to that quickly. So I think momentum is probably the word that I would use for 2024.
Okay, brilliant. So, as we're actually for once leaving a cost of living podcast on a reasonably positive note, I think we should end there. Thank you so much for joining us. And our first client joining us on this side. So please, if you're listening to this regularly and you would like to be involved, please let us know. And you said people like people. We're actually in the same room together for the first time. So let's hope we do like each other. But thanks for listening. We look forward to catching up with you in a month's time.
Brilliant.